What's up guys, Brian here down in the Gecko lab. Thanks for joining me once again. Today I'm bringing you a product review of a new Gecko diet. The guys over at Lugarti Gecko Diets, Lugarti, I thought I said it wrong, I don't think I did. Lugarti Gecko Diets, they hit me up a couple weeks ago. They say, hey, we'd love to have you test out our diet. Can we send you a few bags? I said, sure, I'd love to have a look at it. So they sent me 2 bags of their diets. I got the dragon fruit flavor and the guava flavor, and we are going to mix them up, make a couple batches of it. I'll give you my thoughts, go over the ingredient list, all of that good stuff, and then we're gonna go feed some of my baby geckos, and we're gonna feed them both REPASHY Classic and one of the Lugarti diets and see tomorrow morning which one they liked better. So I'm going to start this off by looking at these diets a little closer. We'll get into the ingredients and all that, give you my thoughts on it before we mix it up to feed it. The first thing I wanted to mention is the packaging is absolutely gorgeous on these. When I got these shipped in, the girl that works for me helping me feed and clean all of our geckos' cages, we got them and she was like, oh, they're so fancy, because they really do look quite nice. I am very impressed with their packaging and presentation. Absolutely beautiful job. A couple things right off the bat. Obviously, they say in big bold letters with dubia roaches. These guys' diets all have insects included, and they use dubia roaches as their insect protein source. Most diet makers use black soldier fly larvae as their protein source. I'm not sure why these guys went with dubia roaches. It seems like an odd choice to me because dubia roaches are fairly expensive. Raising them, getting them to breed, keeping a large colony, or buying them, they're pretty expensive to get into. So I'm surprised these guys chose that insect, but I do like that because, little fun fact, my feeder insect of choice would be dubia roaches if it were feasible for a collection the size of mine. The other thing that stands out to me on the front of the package is the flavors, guava and dragon fruit. Those are 2 flavors that I don't think I've seen before in gecko diets. New flavors is always nice if you're going to add a new diet into your rotation. Having it being a flavor that you don't already have, that's a plus. Moving on to the back of these guys, it says in big bold letters here, 20% insects, 60% fruits. I like that as well. That means there's not a lot of filler in these. That is a problem that you can see with really cheap gecko diets, is they have a lot of filler. It's like really cheap dog food. So you don't want to feed dog food to your geckos. They need to be eating insects and fruit, and then the rest should be healthy stuff, vitamin supplements, probiotics, stuff like that. That's what these gecko diets have going on, so I'm really impressed to see that. So far, just a quick glance that I've done over the ingredient list. One thing that I did notice, 2 things that I did notice. They both contain both bee pollen and dried whole eggs. So the 2 notes that I want to make about that, bee pollen is something that's been very popular for the last 4 or 5 years, adding bee pollen into your gecko diets. This started with gecko diet sellers offering little bags of bee pollen, and it was pitched as an additive to your diets to get picky geckos to eat more of their diets. It was like, you know, if your gecko won't eat, add some bee pollen in and it increases their appetite for the diet. Bee pollen is incredibly healthy, and I do put honey in my diet when I need to get a picky gecko to eat, so I can see where using bee pollen would work. I personally think honey would probably work better, but we're splitting hairs at this point. The point is, it's interesting that these guys chose to do that, and I wonder if that will translate into a good feeding response on these. The other note that I wanted to make is the dry whole eggs. So most diets use dried eggs, and there's 2 schools of thought, either dried whole eggs, including the yolk, or dried egg whites. A lot of diets, including ones that I love and feed, use just dried egg whites. The idea behind a dry whole egg diet is it's a higher fat content when you use the entire egg, not just the whites. And I like that both for my breeders, because laying eggs all season is obviously hard on the females, and for the babies as growing geckos, I think a slightly higher fat content is healthy for them. But the main thing that I like is I have noticed with diets that use whole eggs, they have a different consistency. Using the whole egg actually makes like a smoother, creamier texture on your diet, and that is something that I've noticed makes a big difference to how palatable the diet is to your geckos. Is what's the texture like. Grainy, gravelly diets that don't mix well don't get a good feeding response. So I do like that. I do like seeing that in here, and I'm real curious to open these up and see what the texture and consistency is. Let's go ahead and do that now. All right, let's open these up and have a look. I'm gonna start with the guava one here. Tear this top off. And as silly as it sounds, I do consider how the diet smells as a not vitally important, not make or break aspect, but it gives me an idea of how palatable it's going to be for the geckos. Interesting. So this one, as you can see, is a super bright pink color, but it actually does not have a very, very distinctive fruity smell. This one smells fruity, but it does smell like that insect protein too. It smells like a good earthy mix that I like to see from these diets. And as you can see here, it is super fine grain, much finer than sand, almost like not quite talcum powder consistency, but very, very fine grain. I really like to see that. Like I said before, the finer grain the powder is, the better it's going to mix up, the creamier, smoother the consistency of the diet is going to be, and the better the feeding response typically is. With insect protein included diets, getting a real fine powder to mix up into a real smooth diet is more difficult, and these guys did a very good job of that. I really like that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the other flavor, dragon fruit. This one I'm real curious to see what color it is now that one is so bright pink with the fruit additives. Holy cow, this one is like bright pink, almost purple. Very basically the same smell, different fruit flavor behind it, but the same kind of smell. And again, very, very fine grain powder. Very nice. I like that. I think this is going to be a very good diet. I expect strong feeding results on this. And that brings us to the next part of my test and review. I'm going to mix up 3 things of Gecko diet. A thing of REPASHY, just kind of my base staple crested Gecko diet. And then 1 batch of each of the Lugarti diets, and we're gonna go feed it to some of my baby geckos, come back tomorrow morning and see what did they eat, what did they choose, and which brand did they like better. So I've got 3 batches of Gecko diet here ready to go. The first one's gonna be our REPASHY. Next up we have the guava mix and then the dragon fruit. I'm gonna throw these on the blender. We'll mix them up, add any food or water if we need to get the proper consistency. And then we're gonna go feed some geckos. Let's check it out. Perfect. Our REPASHY looks like it can actually use just a touch more diet in there. It's a little watery. That is perfect. Let's go ahead and mix up the Lugarti guava flavored now. That is looking pretty good there. That is our Lugarti guava flavored, and I'm gonna go ahead and add just a touch more of the dragon fruit because the guava needed more. And we'll see where that gets us on this one. I have to say, for aesthetic purposes, the dragon fruit clearly wins the day. Bright purple. All right, perfect. There we have our 3 diets. I am going to use the REPASHY and the dragon fruit for my test. I'm gonna use this on some other babies. I'll let you guys know how they like it. But for our head-to-head test, I'm gonna do the dragon fruit against the REPASHY. We will test these 2 out, see which one the geckos choose to eat tonight. Let's go feed some baby geckos. So I've got all my feeding supplies here set up. I'm going to feed this group of babies right here, the REPASHY as well as the new Lugarti diet side by side, and we'll see which one they prefer. If you guys want more information on how I house my babies and feeding them, I did a whole video where I bring you guys along to get ready and feed babies with me. check the description box for that. You can check it out. It's a really fun video. But let's go ahead and get into this and see how these guys do. Alright guys, that's 30 cages that I just fed both diets to. I'm going to come back in the morning, pull all these food dishes out, and we will take a look at which food the geckos preferred. Alright everybody, so I am back down here in the lab. It's the next morning and I went and collected all the food dishes from our impromptu, very unscientific experiment I ran last night. Again, I fed both the REPASHY and the dragon fruit flavor. I didn't use the other flavor, I just did the dragon fruit in this head-to-head. I did give the other flavor to a bunch of our other geckos that I'm going to check on later, but for this one, I did the dragon fruit. So we have the dragon fruit on this side, the REPASHY on this side. I fed 30 different cages, both diets, so there's 60 total food dishes here, 30 of each. Here's the results I got. I split it into food dishes that you can clearly see there's food missing out of, and food dishes that you can't really tell whether or not the geckos ate. If they did eat some of it, they didn't eat enough to leave an impression. This is what we found. I've got 13 of the dragon fruit flavor that clearly have been eaten out of. 13 out of 30, so that's what, 17 left that didn't get eaten out of. The REPASHY, however, I had 19 that were eaten out of, 11 that don't look like they've been touched. Now, you may hear that and think, oh, that's a big win for REPASHY, but I actually consider this a very, very positive result for the dragon fruit flavor. Man, say that like 10 times. I consider this a very positive result for this dragon fruit flavor because this is a head-to-head challenge. So the geckos had 2 choices of food, and one of those choices was a food they see all the time, they're used to, they know the smell, they recognize it, and still in 13 of those cages the geckos chose to go to the other food brand and eat the new dragon fruit flavor. I personally think that's a very strong result. I've done this kind of a head-to-head challenge once before with a food that was not highly recommended. It was not a healthy food. I was just curious to see if the geckos liked it head-to-head with REPASHY, and they did not. They almost didn't even touch the other food. I don't remember what brand that was. I think it was the first generation Zoomed food. The new Zoomed food is much improved. The old one from like 5-6 years ago was absolutely horrible. I did this, I believe it was that food I did this with, but this one, very positive result. That dragon fruit flavor got a good feeding response. I also fed the dragon fruit on its own, standalone, to about 20 more of my geckos, and all of those did seem to have eaten it, so that was a good result. And I fed it to my one Chihuahua gecko that I got, and that guy chomped down about half a bowl full too, so he didn't have any problem going after it. Seems like it does get a good feeding response, and that is a good thing, because that's the biggest thing with foods. One is the health, the nutrition, and the other is, do the geckos eat it? There are some foods that are super healthy, but if the geckos won't eat it, that doesn't matter. This one, I do like the ingredients. I think it's a healthy food, and it appears the geckos are receptive to it. So at the end of the day, my conclusion is A grade for this food. A grade. The dragon fruit especially. I'm going to do more testing on the other flavors. I did just get an email that there's a new flavor coming out, and they're going to send that one over to me to test as well. So after these results, I'm excited for that. There's definitely going to be more videos coming on this, guys, so stay tuned. But like I said, overall, super impressed. This was fun to see. Fun to see how, I love how bright this food is. It's so cool to me. But fun to see that I've got a new type of food I can recommend to everybody. When people are asking me what to feed my geckos, I am going to put this on my list of foods that I am happy to recommend for people to feed. That's going to do it for me today on this one. Man, I'm having trouble talking. That's it. That's all I got. Thanks for joining me today, guys. Keep an eye out. I'm sure I'm going to have another video. Maybe I'll do this again with a Pangea flavor. That was my one thought, is I should use a food that also has insects in it, because this one does have the dubia roaches. So I think when I get the new flavor, I'm gonna do that versus the Pangea with insects, and we'll see how that one goes. I'd like to try this again and see if we get similar results. Thanks for joining me, guys. I will see you soon. I'm Brian. As always, altitudeexotics.com. Follow us here, Facebook, Instagram, everything we got going on. I always appreciate it. I love you guys. We'll see you soon.